I die first, just put me in the ground, oh fancy hearse.
You know, the president can sue a ham sandwich. He can send 1,000 lawyers to Pennsylvania.
Go down to the river, swim until you get your fill. Left you a six-pack and a rope swing.
Thank you all. Yes, you heard If I Die First by the Mont Vales, an Appalachian band, and we're featuring music from Appalachian bands in every single episode. That was the intro, and the outro today is going to be Gasoline by Rob Pimp. If you want your song featured on an episode, just let us know. Shoot us an email, info@appodlech.com. Send us your song, and we will feature it on an episode. Done.
Make sure you don't put my laugh in there because I feel bad.
Well, you're recording at raw audio, right?
Yeah.
All right. Back at it again. December the 1st. We're making it through this year, this crazy 2020 year. John, I have a question for you.
Okay.
And I don't know if you're able to answer it or not, but I'm going to go for it. Because Joseph Biden got elected, I'm in the market for some guns, for some weapons, because I'm assuming that the 4-year moratorium on the war on Christmas will be over soon.
I was not expecting to go there. I don't think I properly read the outline.
Look. Look, every time a Democrat's in office, there's a war on Christmas. Can't say Merry Christmas, have to say Happy Holidays. And every time a Republican takes office, somehow that war is under a customary ceasefire for between 4 and 8 years. So my question is, John, to you, do I need to prepare for another war on Christmas now that a Democrat is going to be taking the White House in January?
First off, I was lectured for 20 minutes today. I kid you not. This is not a made-up story. From my wife about how other people in different countries don't say Merry Christmas. They say Happy Christmas. And her big thing was, oh, it's true. The original wording to that, the night before Christmas, at the very end where he says Merry Christmas, the original wording is Happy Christmas. I was lectured on that for 20 minutes.
Go ahead.
Oh, no. And the reason why is because we were watching a cooking show. So I guess it transitioned from that to telling me that I was wrong about saying Merry Christmas so much.
Okay, so what you're telling me is the war on Christmas has already started, and Taylor, your wife, fired the first shot.
Well, I think she's okay with saying Christmas. I don't think that's the problem. I think she's torn. She's having a dilemma. Does she go outside and scream Merry Christmas or Happy Christmas? She doesn't know.
Listen, so here's my 2 cents. We don't often get the opportunity to say Merry.
True.
Combined with another word. But we do say happy a lot. And you know what the other thing is? Happy Christmas kind of sounds fucked up. Maybe that's just like, the mind control that we've been under by
Santa.
By Santa Claus in corporate America all these years. But, I don't know. Let your freak flag fly. I think the connotation is the same. However, she does bring up a good point. More importantly, I want to bring up something about Christmas past. Since this is the 1st of December, obviously, and stores are already, they've been ready for Christmas for years.
For years? Yeah, they've been really fucking good at it. It's like they practiced last year.
The test run. Weeks. Stores have been ready for weeks, and I've got to, I thought of this the other day because I heard it came up in something I was listening to, and it just reminded me of a time in the past, Beanie Babies. And I remember the blood-curdling roars of people in department stores during Christmas past in the 90s, early 2000s, really mostly probably just 90s, just going after Beanie Babies like it was a pot of gold. And I'm wondering, like, is there, and to give listeners context, like, this was a whole thing back in the 90s, late 90s, where like people were collecting Beanie Babies, kind of like Pokemon cards, which we've gotten into that many times in previous episodes. But is that ever going to happen again, where we have a fad like that for Christmas or for any time?
I think we currently have a Beanie Baby situation, and if you're watching on YouTube, you'll see them behind me. Funko Pops. I think
disagree.
I think those are the next Beanie Babies.
Because you know what? Most people I could talk to don't know what the fuck a Funko Pop is. I think they would probably think it was a candy.
No way. The Funko Pops, I'm telling you, the amount of money that some of these things go for is stupid.
How much?
I can think of one off the top of my head that goes for well over $10,000.
That's absurd. Well, I think a first edition of Dobie the Doberman Thai Beanie Baby would probably capture a good chunk, but maybe not 10 grand.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I think my most valuable one is like maybe $100, but nothing insane.
Fair enough. Like Beanie Babies was just a cultural thing that captured the world. All right, and to give an example, I remember McDonald's did a line of Beanie Baby toys. And we would go to McDonald's and wait in lines longer than the lines to vote in Georgia, and wait there for these, like, to get the Beanie Baby. And I was probably 7 at the time, and I was commissioned to go to the front of the line and ask the people, hey, they still got that Doberman, or they gone on to the Caterpillar? Because they started to run out. It was fucked up. Anyway, my point is that was really weird. We wasted a lot of money on it, thinking that they'd be worth something someday, and they aren't.
Yeah, like I said,
Christmas.
Funko Pops have become that. I'm in a bunch of groups on it. The amount of money that these people will pay for, I know it's the nerdiest thing I do.
I like how you say these people, yet you have an entire shelf of them behind you right now.
I have 3 shelves behind me.
There you go.
But part of it's wrestling, so that doesn't really count. Anyway, I don't pay that amount of money. Like, that's not what I do. But there are people who will pay hundreds, if not thousands of dollars for certain ones.
I find that insane, but I mean, if people are willing to pay, take their money. That's what I say.
For sure.
Anyway, well, enough of that BS. We have oh man, we got a great episode coming up. But first, before we get into that, we got some announcements to make. New Patreon patron shout outs. John, we got some more people that have graciously supported us this week. Let it rip. Who we got?
4 more, Chuck. I mean, it just keeps adding up. It's insane. Thank you very much. This week we've got Danny Kaysen, which that name I think that's one of the coolest names I've heard. Jana, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, because that name is cool shit too. And Molly, you're like me. John is kind of an ordinary name, but we make it unique, so that's why you're great too.
Truth.
I didn't want Molly to feel bad if I didn't say, like,
Molly. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right.
Molly, it's the thing that I have to have at every festival.
Yep, it's that thing that Wiz Khalifa takes and he gets fucked up. No. Yeah. Well, again, thank you all so much.
I don't even know what Molly is.
It's it's not LSD. It's ecstasy. It's
okay.
MDMA.
Okay, thanks for letting me know.
But it's like the more pure form of it.
Do you know what else it is? A new patron.
Molly. That's the song. Anyway, thank you all so much for that. And you know, every patron that we have gets access to our exclusive segment, which we do every single week. This week, we're talking about some of our favorite stories. Our presenting sponsor for this episode is Trilogy Coffee. Big John, in the year that is 2020, routine is everything. And you, like myself, like to start off the morning with a good cup of coffee to get the day going.
That's true. I need my coffee in the morning. It's huge for me. Look, Chuck, I can't even do this podcast without a cup of coffee beforehand. That's how important it is. So, no coffee, no podcast. I will strike.
That's right, Big John, and we can't have that. But about our sponsor, Trilogy is a small batch coffee roaster that serves specialty grade and ethically sourced coffee with as much transparency as possible. Big John, you know transparency is important. If you walk into your big box coffee roaster and get your over roasted and burnt coffee, you don't know where it's coming from. Could come from a ditch, could come from a dumpster behind a Wendy's.
I've had ditch coffee. It's terrible.
No, ditch coffee is terrible. I want to tell you about my favorite blend, though, that Trilogy has. It's called Kenya Kahoro. It's a light roast with notes of green apple, caramel, and black tea, sourced from the Boma Washing Station in Kericho County, Kenya. And so they know exactly where this is coming from. They can tell you on their website, Trilogy can, that 360 members of the washing station are there washing the beans, of which 120 are women. The coffee is dried for 14 to 17 days, then washed. According to traditional processing, the end result is a coffee with a clean profile accented with bright citrus notes, not ditch coffee.
Well, Chuck, you do love the details, and normally they're a bit over my head, but this time I had to sit down and really look into it, and you know what? You got me hooked too, which is a tough thing to do, if I say so myself. But I love that they tell you exactly what you're putting into your body. As an athlete like myself, it is really important for me, just like LeBron James, to know what's going into this machine so that I know the output that I can give. I can give 100% on this podcast, Chuck.
Got to take care of that machine, Big John. Well, last thing I want to point out, though, for our listeners is that they care about the environment, too. Trilogy does. Each bag of their coffee, and you can get it full bean or ground, comes in environmentally conscious, biodegradable bags.
We have a special offer for all of our listeners, not an exclusive, it's for everyone, Chuck. And they can use the promo code, it's real easy, APPODLACHIA, APPODLACHIA, to get 20% off bags of coffee and Trilogy merchandise. When you go to trilogycoffee.com, Trilogy is TRILOGY coffee.com, and enter the code at checkout.
That's right, Big John, trilogycoffee.com. We'll put a link to it in the show notes. Support this small business and get yourself some delicious coffee. It is worth it. So, all right. Moving on, though, before we get into the meat and potatoes of our show, we got to do Data-lachia. Data-lachia is that part of the show where I focus on some of the numbers about Appalachia. They're important to telling the story about this region. I say a number. John tries to guess what it is. I tell him what it really is. He is never right, and we always talk about it. John.
Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert, John. The number for today is 20,000.
Okay, 20,000. 20,000.
And can I give you a hint?
Yeah, well, I'm going to say yes. You don't have to ask.
Well, look, I didn't know how confident you were. So the hint, it has to do with the subject of today's show, which is cannabis.
Ooh, 20,000. The number of plants currently in Kentucky.
Number one, you didn't specify which plants. Number two, no.
Well, yeah, because I knew it wasn't in Appalachia, because we already talked about how there's like 1 million plants in Appalachia right now. Cannabis plants.
No.
No. I was just making clarity. I'm not right.
At least we got that cleared up.
I don't know. I would venture to guess it's got to be something like 20,000. Oh, 20,000 drug-related arrests every year.
You fucking kidding me?
Did I get that?
God damn it, I can't say this on the show now because you got one right.
Shit. I fucking did it. Oh my God, it's like the first time I scored 45 in a game. Holy shit.
20,000 residents of the state of Pennsylvania are arrested each year for marijuana-related offenses. I think we can count that basket. We'll give it to you.
Oh man,
That was
Whew.
impressive. That was impressive, John. But what's not impressive is that 20,000 people each year are arrested in the state of Pennsylvania for marijuana-related offenses. It is bullshit. And it's a shame. And it's something that I don't have the statistics in front of me for every other state in Appalachia, but I'm sure similar story of tons of people getting arrested. Tons of people are currently incarcerated in Pennsylvania and across the country today. And it's a shame. And it shouldn't be that way. Think about it this way, John. In Pennsylvania, you get arrested for something where in state of California or Oregon or Colorado or Washington is perfectly legal. And the only difference is that you are a few hundred or thousand miles away from a different part of the same damn country.
Well, I was going to say, I don't think we need the statistics. I'll just go ahead and guess them because, I'm kind of shooting 100%. Okay. I'm batting 1,000. Anyway,
it's that Trilogy coffee.
That's exactly what it was. I drank some right before I got on the air. The big thing here is, and we've been talking about this for the last 40 years, where we look at this plant and we go, well, the plant actually does do these great things. Then the last 20 years, we've proven that they do these great things, and
they're not as harmful as alcohol.
Right. And we've legalized that because it makes a shit ton of money. But oh wait, cannabis does too. The people arguing against this have got to be high because it makes no sense as to why we have not legalized this.
Absolutely. It is true. And I think that just like the criminal justice system in this country, like prisons are overcrowded. These are offenses that, again, in other parts of the country are like what you do is perfectly legal. But I don't know. To me, it's just absurd. There's not a ton to say about that other than it's ridiculous and it needs to change. But I think that really builds into what the episode is about today. And I'll cut this segment short because we will get into a lot more substantive discussion about cannabis with our interview. I just want to say, like, this interview, John, it reminds me of that time after the initial invasion of Iraq when I don't remember who it was. I think it was a general or the admiral or the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff in 2003 after they got Saddam Hussein, went up in a press conference and addressed to the American people and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, we got him." Well, I think the same way about this episode, John. We got a guy who is a rising star, who is a legend of his own right, who has been working to improve the state of Pennsylvania and his local community for decades. Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman of the great Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Is it a Commonwealth?
It is a Commonwealth.
Nailed it. The great Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. John, I have not been this excited for an interview for a long time. I'm going to cut that because that sounds shitty. John, I was super excited for this interview. I've been following Lieutenant Governor Fetterman for a long time. He is a guy who is a straight shooter, and he does not mince words. He gets at it, and he is so good at communicating his message, and he is a progressive in the state of Pennsylvania. And just appeals to so many people in that state. And I think he's such an interesting guy, and I really was excited to get to talk to him.
John Fetterman is what the Democrats should look at and say, so this is how you win elections. Because he's able to sit there, look you dead in the eye, tell you exactly what he thinks, and still convince you that he's right. That's not something you can teach. That's the same thing. I'm not comparing the two in terms of politics, but that's a JFK thing where JFK could sit you down, talk to you about a certain topic, and then swing the vote his way. That was a gift that he had. That's a gift that dare I say it, Big John Fetterman has. I think he's earned that title. It's tough to earn that title. And I think that I'm probably the person. I'm probably the gatekeeper. I'm probably the person who gets to knight all the if you're big anything, right? So I'm knighting John Fetterman as Big John Fetterman. Whether or not he likes that title, I don't know. If he doesn't have to keep it because he's kind of a scary guy.
I don't think he's scared at all. I think he's inspiring. And
oh no, I meant when you look at him, he's intimidating.
Yeah. Well, anyway, without further ado, our interview with Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman. appreciate you taking the time to talk with us. I wanted to just real quickly give you a little bit of background to us. My name is Chuck Cora, and this is my co-host, John. Our podcast focuses on Appalachia, and we started it after John ran as a Democrat in a very deep red part of West Virginia back in 2018. I helped manage his campaign. We realized we wanted to continue talking about the issues and provide a different voice for Appalachia. So that's kind of the purpose of our show and what we're doing. And we've talked a lot about cannabis and the people who are advocates for it in different states in Appalachia. We've talked to people who literally have told us that it saved their life from being on chemo and things like that. And so because you're such an outspoken proponent of it, we wanted to have you on the show to talk to you about it and give our listeners some of your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I'd be delighted to. Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, I wanted to start by talking about your statewide tour that you did. You visited all 67 counties in 2019 in Pennsylvania on a recreational marijuana listening tour. I'm curious what ultimately prompted you to do that, and what was your takeaway from people you talked to in places outside of the major metro areas, outside of places like Pittsburgh and Philly?
Yeah. Well, the reason why I decided to do it is because this was a conversation that everybody wanted to have. It was by far and away the most engaged public policy discussion that Pennsylvania's ever had. We had tens of thousands of people come out for these meetings. We had, 80,000 comments and things submitted online. Just the level of engagement, again, it's unprecedented on any other public policy topic here in Pennsylvania. And I went to all 67 counties because every one of those counties matter, and the people that live in there matter too. And so often their voices are ignored, or they're marginalized, or they're ignored. And I wanted to make sure that they were very much part of this conversation. And what they told me is that they want this. They don't understand why it's such a big deal. And it affirmed to me what I've always said, that marijuana, weed, is a bipartisan issue.
Lieutenant Governor, thank you so much for doing this interview. We really do appreciate it. The big thing that Chuck and I always talk about, we kind of talk in the abstract about this. It's about the economic benefit of cannabis legalization, especially in Appalachia. So I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit about what it would mean for Pennsylvania to legalize recreational cannabis, and particularly what would it mean for like the average person in Pennsylvania?
Here's what it would mean. It would mean that 20,000 fewer of us would be criminally charged for using a plant every year in Pennsylvania, right off the top. It would mean that we could free tens of thousands of people from a criminal record that in the past were charged with this nonsense, just some stupid weed conviction. It would mean a cash crop for our farmers. It would mean billions in long-term revenue for our Commonwealth, which could be used to invest in a lot of these smaller counties that are definitely underinvested in. It would mean tens of thousands of new jobs that don't require a nickel of subsidy. It would give young people another reason to stay in Pennsylvania, to invest in Pennsylvania and put down roots. I always try to employ or embrace the counter argument to my own, and prohibition just is utterly indefensible. It's just vestigial reefer madness. I mean, that's all it is. If you are pro Jack Daniels, then you got to be pro weed, because I could hit a big fat one and just be like super chill and maybe eat too many Doritos. But if you guzzle a bottle of Jack, I mean, this is going to destroy your liver. I mean, this idea that we've criminalized the plant is absurd, and it's an outrage, quite frankly. I use CBD lotion on the regular. In fact, it's remarkable, and it's a sense of rage as a libertarian to some extent too, that this substance was kept from us because of reefer madness. But it's like, yeah, hey, dude, have as many Oxy scripts as you want, and it's just absurd.
Absolutely. And I completely agree. And I think that kind of is a good segue to my next question, which is the thing that's always kind of boggled John and my mind a little bit, is that this is a no-brainer, both from an economic standpoint and a social justice standpoint. It's a slam dunk moneymaker for states and a big job creator.
grand slam across the board. And let me also, I'm going to throw this out here too, because I believe it's tangential and very related. Mushrooms too. Pennsylvania is the #1 producer of mushrooms in the world, hands down.
Really?
Tenant Square, yeah, not even close, not even a close second. And here we are also criminalizing a mushroom that has already demonstrated enormous potential for mental well-being and microdosing. And it's like, what if you marry agriculture and revolutionary new wellness and decriminalizing plants that you could grow next to your tomatoes and turn it into something that benefits us economically from a freedom standpoint, from a justice standpoint, from a revenue standpoint? It's free money. Literally saying, no, I don't want $5 billion in free money over the next 20 years. Let's let the cartels keep it. Let's let the drug dealers keep it.
Seriously.
Instead of
Well, what are the current political barriers to that happening in Pennsylvania right now?
key members of the Republican Party in the state legislature. That's only it. Only it. And I honestly don't know. They don't really articulate it in any kind of a way that I could discern. I joke, but it's actually not a joke. It's for them to keep saying we have bigger things to talk about than legal weed. There sure are a lot of conservative states that are talking about legal weed and voting for it. If you're to the right of South Dakota on anything, I think that should say, well, maybe I ought to revisit some of these things and rethink this. And you don't have to use weed. You don't have to love weed. You don't to acknowledge that it should be legal. Just the same way I don't consume tobacco at any level, never have. But I think you or anyone has the right to go to a store and purchase it safely, legally, to have it taxed, et cetera, and regulated to the extent that it is. I don't understand why weed is anything outside of that.
Yeah. Well, and another thing I'm kind of wondering too, with respect to that, is your neighboring state of New Jersey they voted to legalize it this past month. Does that create any more pressure
Huge. That's and now New York's going to go. So Pennsylvania's going to be, well, you guys are West Virginia. You have you guys down here. We have New Jersey. We're going to have New York, and it's just, and then we're also going to have Canada and Mexico. I mean, like we're the filling in a weed sandwich, geographically at this point. And now Rhode Island. I mean, like all these states, it's just a matter of time. And the thing is, I know I'm right about it. It's just a matter of how long it takes the legislature to acknowledge it. It's so much harder to support prohibition than to just say, well, I've evolved on weed. Let's just figure this out, together.
You hinted at it earlier about you talked about the number 20,000 number of Pennsylvanians arrested due to cannabis related arrests. Can you tell me if you were to legalize cannabis, what does it mean for the social justice part of the cannabis movement? Because I think a lot of people talk about finances, but they forget about that part. Yeah,
it has to follow. Like this idea that your record could be damaged because of some stupid weed conviction 20 years ago is absurd. And that's not justice. That's perpetual punishment, because it stops you from volunteering at your kid's school. It stops you from maybe getting a better job or getting a clearance or a license that you need professionally or something. Like, oh my God, you got caught with a roach clip when you were 21 years old, and now you're trying to get some certification to be middle management or whatever at 41. It's like it's punitively stupid, and it's very much a jobs issue as far as I'm concerned.
We have a number of listeners in Pennsylvania. Do you have any tips or something that they should be doing? If
they're like blow up their state rep or state senator with legal weed for PA, like this is what we want. Respectfully, I mean, don't call them, hey asshole, we want legal weed. You do it in a respectful, constructive way where it's like, hey, Madam Senator or Mr. State Representative, we really need to get sane about legal weed in Pennsylvania. That's, outreach. And because they know it, it's not a secret that most people want this. And the ones that don't, that's a distinctly minority fringe perspective. Like for the longest time, they tried to make weed like this fringe, hippie Jeff Spicoli, like, no, actually prohibition of it is actually the fringe weird perspective. The reefer madness notion is the fringe weird perspective.
So don't call him an asshole. I'm gonna have to change a lot of drafts.
Hey,
that's gonna be tough.
You'd be surprised the interaction you see online where it's like hitting in the face with a wet rag. Like that's not gonna, make friends and influence people or whatever the expression is. It's just trying to make the argument on the very real, legitimate, factual basis that we have right now.
So we've been talking about cannabis a lot. Something I wanted to pivot to, I know that we only have you for a limited amount of time. The big thing going on in Pennsylvania right now is the election. So obviously it looks like Donald Trump has lost in Pennsylvania. You've been very vocal on what's been going on. No,
I've been very truthful. Truthful. Like this idea that it's a dispute is what's so disingenuous. You and I wouldn't have a podcast where we argue every week what 1 + 1 = 3, because factually that's not true. And to say there was voter fraud is just factually not true. I don't like the fact that I lost my hair, but I don't like to argue. Like, no, I didn't. It's there. You just can't see it. I mean, like it's patently absurd. There are outcomes in life where we do not like them, but that does not grant us the right to question them, particularly when, if you want to kid yourself in the mirror every morning, you're the only one that's deluding yourself. But when you are actively damaging the American franchise that underpins, our society, that's yelling fire in a crowded theater when there isn't.
Well, and the reason I wanted to bring it up too is because we just talked about how some of the members on the Republican side in Pennsylvania have been holding up cannabis legislation. This type of stuff worries me in the sense of, in the future, do we become more of a divided party versus party, especially when now we're disputing whether or not elections have actually been, won.
The truth always prevails, and the Republicans know the truth about the election. They do, and I understand there's a strong need to cater to the snake handling weird fringe of their party, because that's very much real. I mean, this idea that they were robbed. I said on Twitter this morning that the same people that think 270,000 dead Americans from COVID is a hoax are willing to believe 270,000 dead people voted for Joe Biden using Dominion. It's this odd intersection that is utterly illogical at every juncture. But weed unifies. You want to know who the big winner on the election in 2020 was? Weed. Weed was, and South Dakota, Montana, New Jersey, hell, Mississippi. Mississippi, up until a month ago, had the Confederate flag in their state flag, just voted for medical marijuana. Like, this is not fringe kind of stuff here. Like, my God, West Virginia. How long is it going to take for West Virginia to come around? Because you have an older population that medical weed can do wonders for. And that helps change the hearts and minds of people too. Everyone knows the truth about marijuana. Everyone understands that weed does not belong in the same categorization as meth, crack, all these other things at all. And the fact that it's Schedule 1 is vestigial reefer madness that is rooted originally in racism and a sense of, we got to find something to be against because we can't be against alcohol anymore.
Yeah, absolutely.
After every day, or a couple pain pills, when you can just use a plant that is non-addictive, that has no known medical overdose deaths, that is something that has been with us for years. And then they say, well, they manipulate the THC. It's like, well, they do that with alcohol too. That's why I can go buy a fucking wine cooler and then also a bottle of grain too. I mean, it's like, that doesn't mean you chug grain when you only wanted a wine cooler. I mean, it's like we're adults here, and it's like there's like, I have a libertarian, and like, we just have to say, like, if you are for X, Y, and Z in terms of these products, it is illogical and indefensible not to add weed to that basket too.
Absolutely.
For any reason.
Absolutely. So I wanted to end. I know that we've got you for a short time, and I wanted to end on something that John and I have talked about a lot. I mentioned before that he ran for office in a very deep red part of West Virginia. Most people didn't even run a Democrat.
Deep red West Virginia. That's redundant. I mean, where's the blue part of West Virginia?
Valid point. Well, he ran for a seat that Democrats don't even typically get on the ballot for.
I'm joking. I know, and I respect that, and that's what helps. I mean, that's those are the best kind of races, because these energize and they activate and they debate. I absolutely salute that, and I'm just saying, like, I think that's not Sisyphean. That's raw democracy at its best. So,
yeah.
great.
Well, and one thing I wanted to ask is, you've gotten a lot of attention for being a Democrat that can really appeal to people outside of the urban centers, which is something that Democrats really need. And I'm wondering, kind of to put a button on this, what are some things that you would give advice to other Democrats running in rural parts of the country to really like appeal to people and get past the negative stigmas attached to having a D next to your name?
I wouldn't give any Democrat advice. It's like, run the race that you want to run, because there'd be plenty of Democrats that would say to you, don't run, you don't have a chance in winning, or whatever. It's like we shouldn't be training our guns on anybody right now, metaphorically speaking. I want to be clear, metaphorically, training our guns on anybody, especially not fellow Democrats, okay? And this idea that you're to blame for my or this or that, it's like, each person represents their respective district to the best of their respective ability, and they must have some validity to carry that flag if they were democratically elected. And I'm not going to be in the business of saying, well, if you do this or you do that, or it's your fault, or it's not, or whatever. It's like, no, it's like, I trust you to articulate your district or whatever that is, vision for its citizens the way I would hope you would do for me too. Like, do you, do me. And I think there are universal themes, but at the end of the day, I'm not in the advice giving business. I'm in the, tell it the way I see it business.
Well, I think that's probably why you're one of the more respected politicians, especially out there. We like that. That's what we want to see.
And that's the point. And it's like, the truth ultimately wins, whether you do or not. I'm not going to run on something that I fundamentally know or believe is a lie or it's not true. And if one of my positions is enough to keep you from voting for me, then it's like, well, I'd rather have you know where I stand than to try to pretend that I'm something that I'm not, or pay you the compliment of being very honest with what I am.
Well, we certainly admire that. We wish more politicians were like that. And, we really do thank you for your time. I know that you're a busy guy, and we are very lucky to have interviewed you today and gotten your perspective on cannabis and all things politics. So we really do appreciate it.
Yeah. And also I've let me just say this. I mean, after I finish saying I don't give advice, but I will say this. It seems you are conscientiously referring it to cannabis over and over again. And I am just, and will continue to always refer to it as weed,
Okay.
Because I want people there are a lot of people that don't know what cannabis is, or they are unsure. I mean, I'm aware of the racist original origin story of marijuana. And it's like, I call it what most everybody I know and ever calls it, weed. And it keeps it simple for people. And I think that's the most important part of messaging, is just keeping things as simple and impactful as they can. So, anyone that says, well, it's cannabis, I'm like, yeah, and a Kleenex is also a paper-based facial tissue. And you don't call Kleenex a paper-based facial tissue. You say, like, hey, I need a Kleenex. And that's how I feel about weed. And that's, if that rankles somebody, then so be it. But people need to understand this is what we're talking about, and then make it in the most accessible and popular term that people use it to. I don't know anyone that would call up their dealer and say, I'd like to purchase some cannabis from you today.
Fair point.
Yeah, trust me, I'm with you. I wish people in the industry spoke like that because I think it'd be more appealing to a lot more people.
And I'm going to be that guy.
Yeah,
You know,
so I think that's awesome.
Sometimes I'll get the tut tut tut. It's cannabis. Okay, so then you need to start referring it to a paper-based facial tissue, not a Kleenex.
Right.
It's like you want this to be universal and accepted, and you don't call a beer a fermented malt beverage. It's just like it's a beer or a brew. And I think it demystifies it. It doesn't sound like if you're a 68-year-old retired dude in Clarion County, Pennsylvania, cannabis. What the hell is cannabis? Or like that sounds fancy, or that sound. It's like, no, it's just weed. So that's that. Running headfirst into this debate, I think it's important that we use accessible language that is authentic and that is really universally used by anyone in that space. So.
I think you make a great point, and I think that's a very fair point. And I think it's safe to say that from now on, we are going to be referring to it as weed, 100%.
Yeah, and cannabis. I understand that it's technically cannabis, but for me, it's going to be weed because we need legal weed in PA. It would be weird. It would be strange for me to say, I'd like to legalize, cannabis. I mean, like I said, we as humans linguistically use things like Kleenex or whatever, or Grubhub, or whatever. When something becomes, like we use something that it just becomes shorthand for what it is instead of trying to articulate it, down to the minutia for some weird reason. I don't understand that. So, and again, I want to be clear. I wasn't critical of your use of cannabis. I'm just saying that some people, are like, tut, 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 don't use it's cannabis. Like, no, it's not cannabis.
No, I appreciate that. And I think it's helpful to us because one of our goals with this is to help people understand this issue better and get on board with it, like how we are right now. So I really appreciate that a lot.
Yeah. And supporting legal weed doesn't mean that you're going to smoke legal weed. It doesn't mean you love legal weed. I don't consume Jack Daniels really at all, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't have the right to do it safely. I mean, so this idea that supporting something doesn't mean that you love it or you're going to name your next born after it. It's like, no, it just means that we are all adults and we should be able to use these substances in a safe, legal, tax regulated manner in the comfort, safety of our own homes. So thank you guys for having me on.
Thank you so much. Thanks for I know you're not in the advice giving business, but thank you for the advice there because we will take that to heart.
It was just an observation.
Okay. That's fair.
It's not about saying, refer to it any way you want. I just, saying that, for me, it's about broadening its acceptance and its terminology. And, like legal brew, versus legal fermented malted beverage. I mean, it's just like, let's just call it what it is and make it universal. So then it doesn't matter what we call it. It'll just be legal and it'll just be one more thing, no different than have a six pack,
Yeah, that's what.
Yeah, I would like to go to the store and purchase a six pack of fermented malt beverage. I mean, like, no, like.
I'm going to try and ask for that today. I'm going to try and ask for that and see if anybody knows what I'm talking about. It's a fair point. I really do like it. I wish more people said it. And Lieutenant Governor, we really do appreciate the time. It means a lot to us to have you on. It's a really big deal for us. So we really do appreciate it.
You're too kind to say that. I don't agree with that, but thank you. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Okay. Thanks so much.
See ya.
All right. Bye-bye.
All right. That was our interview with Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman. Again, a delight to talk to him. Really appreciate him taking the time out of his insanely busy schedule. And when I say insanely busy, I mean he has done press hits on every major news outlet and has been a really big force in the post-election really like certification process in Pennsylvania and dispelling some of the rumors going around about it and the stuff that the president has been putting out that's been false. So really appreciate him taking the time to speak with us. And I really enjoyed our conversation with him.
Yeah, we need more politicians like John, not only because I think that he's a successful Democrat. I think it's also because he's willing to dispel misinformation. A lot of politicians aren't willing to do that anymore. They're not willing to take it on, headstrong as like he does. He doesn't care. He's going to run through it. That's how he does it. And he doesn't just try to prove the misinformation wrong. He tries and is successful at discrediting the source as well, because I think when you're spreading that type of misinformation, you should be discredited. He does a great job at doing that, especially with his social media game, which again that's how you reach the masses anymore. And he's very successful at it.
Absolutely. He kills it on social media. I think my favorite thing was when he said that if the Trump campaign keeps losing at these lawsuits he was referencing, then they're going to get sued by the Cleveland Browns for trademark infringement. That was amazing.
That's pretty solid.
That's pretty solid. Well, anyway, I hope you all enjoyed that interview. I know that we did a lot. And yeah, let's just roll right into it, man. Look, speaking of beef, we're going to get into beef with Big John, but I got to tell you, I made beef bulgogi today, a Korean dish. I had moose beef earlier this week. I had turkey. It's not beef, but it's a meat. I just got to show you, I'm here. I'm credible in this conversation, but the guy with the real beef is Big John. So without further ado, beef with Big John. I'm assuming.
To be fair, I did not eat. I have one. I got it.
Cool.
I did not have beef today. I had bouillabaisse, which I think is how you pronounce it. I made it. It's a French dish, which I just been watching too much Top Chef, Chuck. That's really what it is.
Bouillabaisse with Big John.
Yes, that's what it is. But that is not the topic of today's Beef with Big John. The big one is actually something that we kind of hinted at. We are really good at foreshadowing, and that is misinformation. I've got beef with it, especially right now in Appalachia. Appalachia right now is currently some of the hardest hit by COVID. It continues to rise in terms of numbers. Hospitals are now at max capacity in multiple states in Appalachia and are only going to continue to have that issue, especially if we start seeing more in rural hospitals because they don't have the manpower like some of these bigger cities. But the biggest thing that's going around, this is the most dangerous thing. And again, this is partially because of social media and the ability to spread misinformation on it. Chuck, right now, there is a huge swing in people our age, the 25 to 40 age range, who don't believe COVID is real. And then they come into the hospital and they say, okay, look, you have COVID. This is why you're short of breath. And then they don't believe the hospital because they've been told that COVID isn't real. Then you have the other people who get COVID, go to the hospital, get an x-ray, and then say, well, I only got COVID because I came to the hospital. It's becoming so ridiculous that nurses and doctors are not only fighting this disease, they're fighting misinformation, and they're fighting people who unfortunately look at this misinformation, partially spread by people like the President of the United States, and take it as the gospel. That's a huge issue. We're going to continue to see a major rise in COVID cases along Appalachia. There's been multiple reports of people, journalists, going to hospitals and trying to essentially talk with doctors. The doctors don't have enough time. They've had to cancel all of their elective surgeries because of everything that's going on. We are now maxing out our frontline workers to the point where they don't have the ability to enjoy their lives anymore. This has become their life, and unfortunately, it should not have to be like that. And partially, it is because of the misrepresentation and misinformation of COVID that's been spread along social media, and we're going to continue to see this rise in deaths and in COVID, because if you think the anti-vaxxer problem is of like the 90s was big, it's only going to get worse from here.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And sadly, the anti-vaxxer thing is still present today.
Mm-hmm.
I think what's so troubling about this is there's it's so politicized and it's stupid, because if you look at these doctors, these nurses, these frontline healthcare workers who go in every day, risk their lives every single day, and all they're saying is just wear a fucking mask. That is all you have to do. And still, people push back against that time and time and time again. And look, there is never, at least to my knowledge, there was never such a groveling about seatbelts. But yet we still do it, and we don't get pissed off about it. We don't have rallies in Washington protesting having to wear seatbelts in a car, because we know objectively it keeps us safe. And it's the same thing with these masks. And it's astounding to me that so many people, when you see an entire world, not just our country, an entire world overtaken by this deadly virus, and still there are people who are spreading misinformation, who are spreading lies, and who are just pissy about this and don't want to wear a mask and see it as a political statement. You cover your mouth when you cough or when you sneeze. It's a very similar concept. And nobody is debating that you spread germs when you cough or sneeze. That's why it shouldn't be debate that you can spread the droplets, the molecules, whatever you call it, into the air just by opening your mouth or just by breathing. They could have coronavirus in it. It's not that difficult. We're on like month 9 of this. And still, like, we're probably the only country, I think, in the world who has people that are denying that this is a thing, that this is a problem. And it's just, I don't know. To me, it is just mind numbing. And it really, I think, shows that we're kind of in a dark place on some of this.
I think Europe is actually having some of the same issues too, with people who don't believe that COVID is real. I think I saw recently a protest where they were screaming at police officers to pick a side between the people who weren't wearing a mask and the people wearing a mask. It was a really stupid argument. But the big thing here is we have been programmed over the last 4 years to no longer believe scientists. We're now told to believe people based off the number of followers they have on Twitter. That's the problem here, is that right. And we're getting to the point now, like I saw recently this anti-vaxxer, anti-masker type person who had a check mark next to their name and decided to quote unquote create research. The research was total bullshit. I looked into it. I read it. It was, to be quite frank, Chuck, it was pure self-righteous codswab. I can't say it because it's too funny. I tried to read your podcast review. It is one of those things. It was just a self-fulfilling prophecy that they wanted to prove their point through fake research. And that's, again, they were able to spread that because they had 200,000 followers. That is the problem with social media. We've now gotten to the point where we believe people based off of whether or not they're an influencer rather than whether or not they're a scientist or somebody who's an expert in the field. I don't know how we change it, but we've got to find a way.
It's horrible. And I think that the fact that people are believing random blue check marks on Twitter that they've never really known or met in their lives and that don't have any real qualifications over people that have studied virology and in infectious diseases for 10, 20, 30 years, it's a dark place. That's all I can say. I mean, but I think that we're going to be in a better situation when we have Joe Biden's president, because we'll have somebody who's leading messaging based on science and not based on conjecture, based on what'll get hits on Twitter, or based on what Tucker Carlson says at night. So I'm a little optimistic about that, but it is really sad there's so many people that just don't believe this. But yeah.
I'm done.
It's a very meaty beef.
Thanks.
But you know what? I'm optimistic, and I just, I hope that I know that all our listeners are wearing masks, and that's what matters. So if you have a relative or your friend or a foe, even if you have a mortal enemy, sworn blood feud with a person, and they're not wearing a mask, tell them to wear a mask. That's our lesson. With that, we'll close it out. Thank you all so much for listening. Again, follow us at podlachia.com. Email us. We've got a new email, info@podlachia.com. Hit us up on the social medias, and we'll see you back here next week.
Thing I own just packed in my bag. Never really cared what they said about us. And you can take what's left, 'cause I left what I had. And it's gonna take more than gasoline to get where I'm going. Yeah. And it's gonna take more than gasoline to get where I'm going. New Orleans to Pasadena.